what's up everybody? Me and Diana are here at, sorry to pull the camera away from me so fast. I wasn't trying to hide.
Because I'm hideous.
And we're here at the racetrack. We're gonna give you kind of not behind the scenes because, well, I mean, I do have, thanks to Matt, a little bit more access than I probably would otherwise, but not like behind the scenes so much as, we got a couple of road glides going by. Very cool. Lots of bikers coming to this event, not surprisingly. So this is the Moto America race at Laguna Seca, Monterey, California. It's a little bit nostalgic for me. I'm back in Monterey, or the Monterey Bay area. I went to school up in Santa Cruz, so really fun to be back up here. I've always wanted to go to a race here, and this is the first year I really had an opportunity to do that. And even better, they're obviously doing the King of the Baggers series still. So really excited to see Kyle Wyman and both the Wyman brothers race around the track on their road glides. Hopefully they'll beat Indian. That might be too much to ask for though on this weekend. You know, I've got a lot of good things coming this way, so can't really complain if they don't win the race. But you know, I think it's gonna be a strong race from Harley. So I'm not worried at all. Harley's done a lot of testing here, and historically has done pretty well. So we're gonna be able to explore a lot of the paddock. I know Moto America has kind of a family vibe about it, and so a lot of the pit is pretty open, and so hopefully we'll be able to get some good footage. I'm even, fingers crossed, hoping to be able to talk to someone within the race team on Harley, just so that, you know, I can get some really cool exclusive content for you guys. We are pretty close to where we should be getting our tickets and passes, so keep you updated as we experience more of the event. Qualifying, I think 2 for the baggers is about to start, and then there's going to be the 3-lap sprint race. Luckily, I have pretty good seats for the pits. So you can see the factory Harley team right there, and excited to see how they do during qualifying. Once they're done with qualifying and the 3-lap sprint race, I'm gonna walk around the pits, try to get some good footage of the bikes for you guys, and fingers crossed I can talk to somebody and ask them some questions about bikes and the riding and the overall series championship. So I'm excited. So now that qualifying is over, hopefully I can get some good footage, or at least spectate the 5-lap sprint race. So there's basically like or 3-lap actually. There's a quick dash for cash that they're gonna do. I believe that both of the Harleys are gonna be in it. If you win, you get $5,000, which is, you know, nice little pot of cash. And then the actual race is gonna be tomorrow after qualifying. So excited to see that quick dash race, and then gonna go and walk around the pits and get some more footage for you guys and see the bikes up closer in person. Okay, so you guys are gonna have to excuse this setup here. I was hoping to get everything filmed exactly how I wanted at the racetrack, but due to circumstances of basically having to work with the racing team schedule because they were trying to win a race or something, I wasn't really able to shoot a good transition between the end of the sprint race and the interview I had with Jason. So that's what the point of this shot is. But I also realized when I was thinking about this, sitting at the editing table, I actually probably should take some time to both explain what my questions are, why I'm asking them, and then give some context or significance to Jason's answers for just the average consumer like you and me.
My name is Jason Kale. I work for the motor company. My day job is manager of product development for Screamin Eagle. I'm also the team principal for the Harley-Davidson Screamin Eagle race team.
The first question I asked Jason was the degree to which the bike's development, both in terms of like its engine performance, its power throughout a race, is affected by the length of the races, because the races in Moto America for the King of the Baggers series are relatively short. They're about half the length usually on average of a superbike or super sport class race. So the more traditional racing classes race about twice the amount of distance, but there's also fewer overall races in the series compared to the other classes of races. So the baggers only race, I think, 5 or 6 times this season, and they only race once per weekend. And so I wanted to get Jason's perspective on how that affects the development of the bike.
It certainly affects development. The amount of time that we need to be out on the track is directly related to how the motor performs. We run a really big air-cooled motor it's relatively easy to create a ton of power. It's less easy to reject all the heat that's created with the power. It's going to be like a lap-by-lap thing. So one of the biggest challenges when we started was just being able to reject the amount of heat. So there's been a ton of focus on the cooling of the motor and the ability to maintain that power level throughout the entire race. The rear cylinder is always the hotter one, so certainly it's shielded. Yeah, I mean, we've worked a lot with radiator placement. You'll see the main radiator in the front of the Road Glide now. We tried to place it in a lot of different areas of the bike, but that air gap that you would generally use on a water-cooled bike that's below the fairing and above the wheel, we need that to cool the cylinder head, so there has to be consistent airflow over there. Anything lower placement on the radiator winds up getting in the way of the lean angle of the bikes. I mean, we're seeing lean angles here about 55 degrees on a bagger, so everything needs to be clean and tight along the sides of the bike, which forces us to put the radiator up in the nose. But it's worked out. It gets good airflow up there. It might not be the most aerodynamic, but helps us keep cool.
The question I followed up with Jason after that was about brake fade. I really wanted to know the degree to which the bikes experience brake fade. I know that most of the highest end braking systems in the world are developed for bikes that weigh 60%, maybe even only half of what the baggers weigh. And so I thought it'd be interesting to find out from Jason what challenges they faced when it comes to braking.
We've had it. We've had issues with brake fade. Yeah, absolutely. Luckily, we have a great partnership. I mean, Brembo is the brake supplier for all of our production big twins. We've had a great partnership with Brembo now on the racing program as well, and we're running the highest end calipers that Brembo creates short of MotoGP. They take, a lot of people think the highest end stuff is the best stuff to put on your bike, but I'll tell you, after every session on the track, those brake calipers come off the bike. Pistons are clean, they're titanium pistons, one seal. They take a ton of maintenance to be able to do it, but when they're performing, I mean, they're second to none. So even though we got 620-pound bikes slowing down from 160 plus miles an hour, the brakes are up to the task.
I didn't expect Jason to answer the question this way, and it was actually really cool because he mentions the fact that sometimes the best or the most premium offering available isn't actually the best for the average consumer. So he talks about having to rebuild the brake system of the race bike after pretty much every session, or at least multiple times during a race weekend, something that's not really a desirable quality for the average consumer who's just riding their bike on the highway. But it goes even further than that, because when you get into racing, sometimes the composition of the materials that you use are great for racing. For example, in MotoGP, they use ceramic discs, but these discs actually don't provide any stopping power compared to a normal rotor until they're really, really hot. And if they're not hot, it feels like you almost have no brakes. And when you think about how we ride bikes on the street, maybe 70 miles without even touching the brake lever once on the highway, you really want the brakes to operate even when the discs are extremely cool. And so I think he just provides a really nice, reaffirmation of the idea that sometimes what is faster, right, or more premium or more expensive isn't actually always better for the average consumer. So since the last time that the baggers were at Laguna Seca, they've shaved seconds off their lap times. And all of the tracks that they've been to in previous years, the story was the same. Seconds have been shaved off their lap times. If you're unfamiliar with racing, that is insane. You measure racing in tenths and hundredths, not in seconds. And so I asked Jason if we can expect to see a continued rate of decrease in line with what we've seen in previous seasons.
I expect lap times to keep coming down. I don't think we're going to see the major jumps. I mean, we're getting to the point where the development of the bikes, pending any rule changes, positively or negatively, but we've got to a point on the development of the bike where we've taken really big changes off, and now we're starting to focus on some of the smaller iterations to improve the bike, the handling, the feel, the response. The raw power kind of race has slowed down a little bit, but we still got a ton of room to improve, and that's the neat thing about this class is we've been on just the steep development curve. We're learning so much every time we come out here that we'll keep getting better.
Obviously, a big component of why any company goes racing is to prove the value of their products, and so I'm sure that Harley is hoping that by having a factory Screamin Eagle racing team using Screamin Eagle parts, that more people are going to purchase Screamin Eagle parts as opposed to aftermarket performance options. So I asked Jason what in the 131 engine that they use in the race bike is actually the same or very, very similar to what's available to the consumer in the 131 crate motor.
I mean, we started the program with our 131 crate engine. We changed 3 parts. We had higher compression pistons, we had larger fuel injectors, and we had a larger lift cam. And since then, every piece of the motor has started to mature a little bit and get a little bit better and a little more premium. But the goal of this entire effort for us is to have all that technology come back down, not only into the street bikes, but also be able to provide, race parts to the growing Harley-Davidson racing scene, which, I mean, on Baggers, who would have thought a couple years ago, but it's pretty cool.
If you're a fan of production bike racing like I am, then you probably know that in many cases, what you can do to the racing bike itself, the bike that you're using in the actual championship, is limited by what can be changed on the actual production bike. And if you think about this logically, if you're a factory team, it means that you end up going to the engineers and the factory to request changes to the production bike so that you can make the racing bike faster. And so I asked Jason if there was anything he would like to see done to the production bikes in order to make life on the racing side easier.
Yes. There's always stuff that we can do on the production side to make the racing life easier. It's always a balance what's really wanted and what's really needed from a production standpoint. But we have, in the year and a half that this has really been going full bore for the Harley-Davidson factory team, we've influenced the product plan significantly. Some of that stuff you've already seen come out, like the Öhlins rear shocks. That was a direct mutual development effort between the race program and the accessory department. But we have stuff even out to 2025 that's matured on the product plan from both the vehicle side and an accessory side that's going to be delivered to the consumer.
I wasn't surprised to hear that Jason said that there were changes that he would like to see. But I asked this question because I was hoping he would talk a little bit about what was coming down the pipeline. And he mentioned 2 things. The first thing he mentioned was that obviously things like the Screamin Eagle Öhlins suspension collaboration, that isn't an isolated thing, right? That we're going to see other parts trickling down from the racing series to the parts catalog. But what I was more excited about was his mentioning of the Screamin Eagle racing department's collaboration with the factory to change the production bikes. As he says, obviously cost and benefits have to be weighed. Certain changes that the racing department might actually make the production bike worse for the average consumer, and so obviously Harley can't do that. And some things that the factory changes we might not ever know, right? Changing where a specific bolt mounts because it allows for different suspension geometry for the racing team. Something that the average consumer like you or me would never really notice, but gets changed on the bike nonetheless because it helps the racing team. And then finally, there's the last category, which is changes that the racing team wants that benefits both the racing team and the average consumer. Obviously, he didn't get into any specifics, and I think that anyone who knows and watches racing can guess that, this was going to happen. But it's cool to hear that Harley is actually so invested in the racing program that they are willing to entertain changing certain things about the production bikes to make the race bikes faster. Because when a manufacturer has this level of commitment behind a racing program, usually you get to see some really, really exciting developments. So in racing, there's what we call factory teams and then privateer and satellite teams. So obviously the factory teams are backed fully by the factory, funded by the factory, and usually run by the factory as well. They usually get bespoke parts that the factory manufactures for the bike. They usually hire the best racers that they can acquire. They develop the bike at usually a very rapid rate. But at least in a lot of other series, you can actually go to the factory and buy a full factory race bike. And I'm not saying go to a Harley-Davidson dealership, buy a Road Glide, and customize it with parts. I mean, go to Harley-Davidson and have them supply you the exact same bike that Kyle Wyman races with. Obviously, they're not going to do that for the average consumer, but if you go to them as a racing organization, you show that you have sponsors, you have a rider, you have the means to do this, they might actually back you. The manufacturer likes this because it gives an opportunity to get more data on their bike, and obviously privateers like this because they get a very, very competitive bike. So it's kind of a win-win. And so I asked Jason to what degree people can purchase any parts that are bespoke to the racing bike for use on other teams. I asked him this because I noticed Vance and Hines was running a swing arm that looked very, very similar to the factory swing arm, and so I wanted to know to what degree everything on the bike was available. Was it just the swing arm, or could you buy a full factory 131 to put into your Road Glide if you wanted to race with the factory motor? To what degree was Harley assisting and or utilizing other teams?
We got into this racing scene for a couple reasons. One, what it meant to the brand of Harley-Davidson to be racing again and to be showing up and competing on a national level, and on a national level that's getting global attention at this point. The second was for what it meant to product development, but that's not just selfish product development. We want to help all the other teams. So there has been a number of teams that have come, that have put significant efforts into their programs, that have come and asked for parts, and we've supplied them. We anticipate as we move forward, and by the early part of next year, if not later this year, that we'll actually have a factory racing list of components that people can purchase. But certainly anybody that comes over to the tent, we help them as much as we can. There's a reason for this big trailer, and that's just not to burn diesel every race that we go to, but it's stocked full of parts. I think there's 3-4 different teams that wouldn't be at the race tomorrow if we weren't able to give them parts. So we're looking to help any team that wants to participate in this performance scene.
A lot of racing is determined by the power delivery of your engine, and Harleys are known to be very, very high torque and to deliver that torque very early in the rev range, which is actually the exact opposite of how most bikes in the racing world actually deliver their power. They tend to be not super torquey and very, very rev happy. And so I asked Jason how that affected development and if that was actually still even true with their race bike, or had they made it more like a more standard race bike.
Yeah, in terms of the power band and the torque band, you have the natural characteristics of what everybody loves about a Harley-Davidson powertrain, and that's big torque, down low RPM, but peak power is at red line, so we rev all the way up to rev line. I would say that we have more of a torque table than a torque curve. I mean, the torque comes up and it's flat and it's all the way across, and that's what's awesome about running the 131 motor. The power band itself is very linear, so it's very predictable. We don't run any kind of traction control out there on the bike, but the riders are able to control it because it is so predictable on the throttle side. In terms of RPM, the big difference, I think, most Harley customers run in pretty low RPM. You're cruising maybe around 2,500 RPM. A lot of people are shifting before 4. Out on the racetrack, we're never below 4,000 RPM. There's not one point on the track. We live in that 45 to 6,500 RPM range between shifts. And the whole goal is really to keep the bike performing as high up in the power band as we can, so we're delivering the most power to the track. And gearing is set up specifically to try to maximize that power. Also understanding that we only have 6 gears. We only use first to launch, so we really only run second through fifth. There's very few gears, and you got to understand where the shift points are coming into and out of every corner. So although we might not always maximize the available power, we're doing that specifically to understand where we can shift safely and effectively and have the best overall performance from a lap time.
So the Superbike class in Moto America and MotoGP and World Superbike, they all have very, very advanced electronics, lots of traction control, quick shifters, basically bleeding edge of technology. I know that initially, obviously, the Harleys didn't have quick shifters because they had these chicken wings, which you could tell basically when the riders were rolling off the throttle to shift up because their arms were flapping around on the throttle side. And so I asked Jason what electronics they were using and if they had any plans for a quick shifter.
Yeah, quick shifter is allowed in the class. It's absolutely something that we want. It's just something that we haven't gotten delivered for the race bike yet, but we're working on it. I think getting rid of the chicken wings is going to lose a little something from the dramatic flair, but you'll also probably notice the chicken wings are a little bit smaller than they used to be, and that's because we've specifically limited the throw of the twist grip so that the riders don't have to move the throttle as far. It's usually 0 to wide open is where we need, so the shortest amount of degrees of rotation that we can give them, the better usually.
So one of the questions I asked Jason next was basically whether Harley had considered going to a different bore versus stroke. The reason I asked him this is that the configuration of a standard big twin, like what we see on the Road Glide ST behind me, is not typical of what you would see on a race bike. Typically, race bikes have very large pistons and very short connecting rods, and that lets them spin at very high RPMs and run relatively large exhaust and intake valves, which means basically at high RPMs, they can get a lot of air in and a lot of air out and make a lot of power from a relatively small engine, 600 cc's or 1,000 cc's. Whereas something like the 131 or even the 117 is a much bigger engine from that, and also is a very long stroke and very short bore relative to those bikes. There's pluses and minuses to each, and if you want a more in-depth understanding or in-depth look at that, I highly recommend checking out a video by Engineering Explained that goes into the details between bore and stroke. But I just wanted you to understand that I asked him this because the regular configuration of a Harley engine is very different than what you would expect to see on a typical race bike.
So currently in the rules for the bagger class, you are limited to 131 cubic inches, but you can get there any way you want. So from a bore stroke perspective. Currently we're still running the 310 bore that comes and the 4.5 inch stroke that comes in the Screamin Eagle 131 engine. It's a phenomenal package. It kind of balances that big bore and stroke advantages from each. We've considered going to a shorter stroke with a larger piston. We've considered going to a longer stroke. It's constantly something that we're trying to balance. So we'll see how that plays out in the future with a product that you may or may not see from the motor company. But there's advantages to each, and it's a constant balance of which is the best to run. Yeah, I won't give too much information about the exact RPM, but we average over 6,000. So if you take an average of the RPMs that we're seeing on the track, it's generally above 6,000, a little bit more. So we're working these engines hard. They're generating a lot of heat. The pistons are going really fast, and we do not have a limit of the number of motors. But durability has been absolutely something we've been improving since day one. We haven't changed a motor during race weekend in the last several races. We go back to Milwaukee after the end of every competition, and the motors do get torn down and inspected, make sure everything's good, checked and tested and rebuilt back up and ready for the next race.
Jason's answer was really exciting to me because he talks about how they have played with the idea of going to different stroke and bore configurations. And so that means that sometime down the line, we might see a short stroke, big bore, big twin that the average Joe like myself could buy or recreate from Harley parts, which would be really, really cool because I love the character of the big twin engines. I love the way they sound, but I've always wanted to rev them higher. And unfortunately, just due to physics, once you go with a longer stroke design, you're just going to be limited on the amount of RPMs that you can spin the motor at reliably. So it's cool to hear that the motor company and Jason and the racing team are considering going to a different engine configuration in terms of bore versus stroke. My next question for Jason was how much of the program is done in-house? I wanted to know that because I think it shows the level of commitment that Harley has, right? The more in-house that they're doing it, the more committed that they are to the program. But I also think that the more that the program is run in-house, the more the chance is that the changes that we see from the racing program trickle down to both the parts and accessories catalog, but also the production bikes themselves. And obviously that benefits the consumer. So I think the more in-house a racing program is, the more chance that the average Joe benefits from it. And so it was really important for me to ask Jason that question.
I mean, the cool thing is we've done as much as we can in-house and leverage the capabilities of the motor company everywhere that we can. And when we do have unique parts like pistons, they're the same supplier. They come out of the actual same forging. Our race pistons come out of the same forging that your 131 pistons come out of. So we have great partnerships with a lot of those suppliers, and we leverage them wherever we can. Obviously, we're not a piston manufacturer anymore. Powertrains are built in the powertrain operations facility outside Milwaukee. All the vehicles and the assembly and the work done on the bikes is done right in Milwaukee at the Product Development Center. So it's a true in-house effort on the part of Harley-Davidson.
The last question I had for Jason was really just what he wants the average Joe to know about the racing program.
I just like people to really understand how much we love the support from the consumers. And the reason that we're doing this is because we want to show what the Harley-Davidson Product Development Center is capable of. It includes all the facilities that we work on, but I really believe that Harley-Davidson has the most passionate enthusiasts that work for a company that I've ever met. And the capabilities in the Product Development Center are world-class, and we do it specifically for our customers. Everything that we're doing here is making our product development process better with the goal of having a better product for the customers. And it's so awesome when people come up to the tent and come out to the races and support us and give us little tidbits of their story or what inspires them, and that's the kind of stuff that keeps us going.
So Diana and I are back now for day 2. This is actual race day for Harley. Hopefully they do well. Yesterday they did well. Kyle Wyman looks like he's got some pretty good pace. What did you think, Diana?
It was a great race. Today's going to be a better race.
I don't think Diana even watched the race. I think they're doing warm-up sessions right now. Actually, I think right now is you can pay to be on the back of a super bike with another rider, which is pretty cool. Because they go quick. And last time I tried to go fast at the racetrack, I broke my leg, as you guys know. So probably should have let it professional take me around the track. I probably should have just ridden on the back. Yeah, we're gonna go get settled, and then I'm going to try to get some footage of the race. It's tough for me to get really good angles. I'm just one dude and I can't post up multiple places, so I'm making a lot of excuses, but I think, this is mostly for the interview that I had with Jason, which I think is going to be really cool, but I do definitely want to get some more footage of the bike, so we're going to do that as well. Anyways, touch base with you guys later.
All her winnings. She's only going to tell you.
It's Fabio's helmet, babe.
Yeah, no, it's Fabio's. Yeah.
You should get it.
No.
Yeah, come on, you don't have enough helmets.
I don't need another helmet. I have enough helmets. You're the Fabio fan anyways. You're just gonna leave me for Fabio.
I would.
So Diana and I are walking to get a better vantage point so that I can get some slow-mo footage, hopefully, of the race for you guys. I'm gonna go over to the grandstands on the opposite side of the track and get them coming out of corner 11, hopefully. So I'm just trying to record at the same time. I'm not even really watching the race, it feels like. I think through the corners, typically Harley's had a bit of advantage. This straightaway here isn't super long, and it's easy to run real deep into first corner. Corner coming onto the straight's real slow, and it does make for a good place to shove it up the inside on the last lap. So you gotta ride defensively through there, which can slow you down and reduce your top speed, which can then leave you vulnerable into corner one. So it's an interesting race. We'll see where... Oh, O'Hara was out of the seat, so Wyman gets ahead of him. They won. Mission accomplished. So now we gotta go celebrate.
Mission 4, KingoftheBaggers podium for race 2. Make some noise! Remember, you can follow all of the action.
I want to thank everybody for watching this video. I'm a huge racing fan, and so hopefully I've instilled in you the desire to watch the races if you aren't already. Please do check out Moto America. Subscribe to Moto America Live Plus. You can stream everything through them, but they also post a lot of free races to their YouTube channel, and so you can watch there. But if you can afford to subscribe, even just for a weekend, I think that you can buy individual weekend passes. It really helps support racing in the US. Motorcycle racing in the US, unfortunately, is not what it used to be, and it's really cool to see factory efforts like Harley and even Indian enter into Moto America, because honestly, the trend has been the opposite, unfortunately. And as a passionate racing enthusiast, I try to instill that in as many people as I can. So I'm abusing Matt's platform to try to get more of you to engage with Moto America's content, because it benefits me, but I think it benefits the motorcycling community as a whole when motorcycle racing exists. It makes the bike better. It gives us another outlet of entertainment rather than just going out and riding, right? Which obviously is fun, and we encourage you all to do as well. But it definitely is exciting to see the best riders in the world ride cutting edge bikes that eventually the regular Joes like us get to experience as well. So check out Moto America, and just a massive thanks to Harley-Davidson. I can't stress enough that I'm just an idiot fan, and how lucky I feel to have been able to interview Jason, get kind of a behind the scenes look at the bike and the racing program. I didn't deserve it, and just want everyone to know how appreciative I am of the opportunity that was presented me. So hopefully I maximized it and you guys enjoyed the video, and hopefully at a minimum your interest in the racing program has been piqued a little bit, and you follow up and watch some racing. Thanks for watching.